Alright, so I want to make a quick video on how to adjust a manual choke on a Holley carburetor, or a carburetor that's similar to a Holley. So basically with these carburetors you'll have a fast idle screw, and you'll have your choke lever here, and usually you have this hooked to a cable that you pull inside of your vehicle, and you'll pull it back and it will you'll pull it back inside the cab, and it'll pull it back like this, and then when your engine's started to warm up you'll knock it forward and then you'll be off of choke. So there's a plate under this air cleaner here that goes flat over the primary throttle bores. So what this fast idle screw does is it sets the amount of idle RPM that you'll have when you open up your choke. So if we look on the other side here, it actually opens up your throttle blades a bit, and I'll explain that in a sec. So as you can see, it wings those open a ways. So, and that's necessary. So generally when you're setting a choke, you want to set it 300 to 400 RPM higher than what you idle at. I usually shoot for about 1300 on a more stock engine to about 1500 on a more radical cammed motor, but that's pretty much how that's done. So we'll get into the explanation of why this is and how a choke actually operates real quick here. So basically two things happen when you pull this choke lever. The first thing is your throttle is slightly open to increase the airstream velocity to add more fuel into the system. And the other thing is that your choke plate is actually completely shut over the primary side of your carburetor to also increase the manifold vacuum through your primary boosters. So basically it's like a suction effect when the choke is closed, and it pulls more fuel through the boosters. So with your throttle open, instead of max vacuum being below the throttle blades, max vacuum will be below the choke horn where the boosters are. So more or less this is all needed since the intake is not warm enough to evaporate fuel into a vapor, which is what the engine will actually burn. So amazingly, it actually burns fuel vapor. So I don't know how we go through as much fuel as we do, but I guess that's just how it is. So once the intake is warm enough, the fuel will vaporize much better and more fully atomize with the air and make for a much more efficient and better burn. And this is why a lot of intake manifolds on the bottom, if you take one off, you'll see two ports where it'll actually route exhaust vapor up into the bottom of the intake manifold to get it hotter quicker. So if you look on the bottom of the intake, you can actually see that where it's cast in. Anyway, so that's all designed so that it'll reach an operating temperature, and the mixtures will stabilize much faster. So there's not sufficient fuel vapor when the engine is cold. So all that's really doing with the choke is adding more fuel into the system to have sufficient fuel vapor to run the car, and it usually runs a lot more dirty. So the faster you can get off the choke circuit and warm the engine, the better. And then again, hence why you have an area on the underside of your intake to route exhaust gases through to keep that part a good temperature. So there is an optimum temperature that you want to be at, and we'll show that in my other video here. So that's basically the whole idea behind a choke. It's pretty simple and it's pretty effective. As you can see here, my idle is a little lower. It's about 600, and I usually idle at 900, and my engine is dead cold right now, so it's warming up and I have the choke off. Now this shows why you need an extra enrichment circuit when your engine's cold. So with that intake manifold in plenum cold, it's not atomizing the same amount of fuel as well, into a vapor, so I have a lower idle. Now when the engine, that intake manifold warms up, it'll actually evaporate off that fuel into a vapor, and I'll get a much higher idle out of the same idle speed setting on my idle speed adjustment screw. So that's why it's so important to have everything set up right and have your choke set up right, because you need it to sustain a good idle, especially when it's cold outside. So then your intake's just that much colder. So anyway, that's another reason why the choke is so important to have set up correctly.